In an age where AI can produce ever more convincing text, images, and audio, it's crucial that we know if something was made by a human or made with the use of AI. Our next talk will be from Andy Parsons. Andy is Senior Director of Adobe's Content Authenticity Initiative, or CAI. CAI is creating open technologies for a future of verifiably authentic content. And I'll continue vamping for a second while Andy gets his slides ready and say that prior to joining Adobe, Andy founded Workframe and served as CTO at McKinsey Academy. He also co-founded Happify, a leading mobile platform for digital therapeutics and behavioral health. Over to you, Andy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aiden. Thanks, everybody, for having me today. I'll tell you right now up front, I'm going to do a series of live demos, so please send good energy because live demos have a tendency not to work. So I'm going to talk about the Content Authenticity Initiative, which is an Adobe-led initiative. But coming off the back of the talk we just heard about standards, excellent panel, it is based on a global standard built by a global coalition, and I'll go into some detail about that before the demo. Effectively, I'm going to talk about something called content credentials. If you'd like one of these pins, you need only ask an insightful question. After I'm done, I'll give you a pin. But this symbol, we imagine, will become as ubiquitous as the copyright symbol or the Creative Commons symbol. And what I'll talk about today powers this symbol. And the idea is simple but powerful in this age of generative AI, where if we can't have a discourse about what is true, what came from a camera, what was ethically or not ethically generated by AI, then we're going to have a very difficult problem with democratic discourse, which I think we're beginning to see around the election cycle. So what this symbol intends to portray is that there's more information and context that's inextricable from the media that you're looking at. So if you're looking at an image or a video, which I'll show you in a moment, understanding where it came from, how it was made, in cases where it makes sense and doesn't cause privacy issues, who made it, perhaps what publisher published it, and moreover, whether this is human-generated or AI-generated or some combination. So that's what this symbol means. The coalition I referred to is about making it available, free, open source, open standard based, and to ensure that this is accessible to all of us as consumers, creators, fact checkers. So the fundamental idea is, how do we capture the ground truth about how an asset was made? I want to be very clear, this is not a truth detector. We're not talking about applying a green check mark to media saying this is true, or this is false, or this is a lie. It's about transparency and context that travels wherever that media travels, whether it starts out from a camera, an AI engine like Midjourney or Adobe's Firefly, then travels to a social media site, then is downloaded. Wherever that media goes, this information remains attached to it. And critically, is cryptographically verifiable using decades-old proven technology around digital signatures. So this is the fundamental idea behind what we're calling content credentials. There are two organizations involved that you should be aware of. One is, again, based on the standards conversation we just heard, an existing global standard that we helped create called the C2PA. So if the Content Authenticity Initiative isn't enough syllables for you, the C2PA is the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. The idea there is that this is a coalition of, I think, about 50 companies involved at various levels, working under the auspices and the governance of the Linux Foundation in a structure called the Joint Development Foundation. And the currency of that organization is time. People join, they pay their Linux Foundation dues, and they spend up to 5 or 10 hours a week creating this global standard, ratifying it, voting it into publication status. We're on the 4th version of this. And again, I want to stress this is already a global standard with global participation. It will end up in ISO or W3C or whatever proper standards development organization is the way to fast track this to ubiquity, but it's available now, it's free. You can go to c2pa.org, and if you have insomnia, this 100-page specification is highly technical, and I recommend you take a look at it. And granted, the best of standards are cures for insomnia, but this is particularly stimulating technical information. And I want to separate that conceptually from the Content Authenticity Initiative, or the CAI, that was started by Adobe initially with 3 members, announced in 2019, just about exactly 4 years ago, with Twitter and the New York Times Company. Now has grown to over 2,000 members. And they're all aligned, not in writing the technical standard, but embracing it and finding the quickest, most well-informed pathways to adoption through open source, through leveraging the open standard, and through exchanging ideas on a popular Discord channel and such things. This will give you a quick idea of the kinds of members of the Content Authenticity Initiative. This is effectively a superset of the C2PA members who are both writing standards and also involved in this global coalition to actually deploy in news organizations, NGOs, human rights concerns, and of course, technology companies as well. And this standard and the open source that I'll show you in a moment covers audio, video, still images, certain 3D assets, PDFs, all those kinds of things. And I want to be clear, it doesn't cover text. Text is a different kind of problem. You can't simply sign conglomeration of text and individual words and attach provenance to it because of the way text is sort of inherently cut and pastable. But any packaged asset, from an image to a document to a video, even if it's streamed over the internet, is subject to the C2PA standard and the content authenticity open source. If this works, okay, great. That was the first experimental video on a slide, so that's good. This shows you essentially what we can expect when you have content provenance. What you're seeing here are some ingredients. So effectively, think of this as a nutrition label, if you will, for digital content. That can tell you as little as when it was made and whether it was made by a camera or Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Firefly or what have you. And as much as who made this, what ingredients were involved. In this case, we're depicting a photograph, perhaps from a stock photograph agency or from a camera, a background that's loaded. We're creating a photo illustration, not necessarily fake news of a penguin in the desert. And then in that last step, we add back some chunks of ice. And this will show you, like a nutrition label, what went into this. Not to tell you whether it's true or not, or whether this depicts an actual thing that happened, but to tell you what went into it and how it was made. And we think that's most important to consumers rather than passing judgment at the platform level or the content curation level about what to believe and what not to believe, but rather to give consumers the ability to decide for themselves. As I pointed out very briefly, this is not only available on software, but the same open source technology and specification can be deployed, and in fact has been deployed on a camera. If you have a certain number of thousands of pounds burning a hole in your pocket, you can go into any Leica store and purchase the wonderful, incredible Leica M11P, which was released to retail just last week. And a similar device coming from Nikon and some of the other CAI members. And these cameras effectively digitally sign assets on the camera as they're made. So we call that a lens capture or glass-to-glass provenance. You snap a picture with one of these enabled cameras or an app on your phone, and you're able to have that provenance that this came from a Leica M11P travel all the way through to publication on a news site, for example. Okay, here's the fun part. I think we need to mirror my screen if we can. Let me see if I can do that here. I'm going to have to call for tech support. So we need to see that up there. So, I did that. The demo will work. The screen sharing less so, I assure you.
Why is the system preferences not there? So it's gone on to extended desktop, isn't it? So do you want that just to go like that?
That's okay.
Yeah?
Not ideal. I'll have to turn around to see it, but.
It's unfortunately, the mirror, there's the appearance, displays.
There we go. No, sorry, that's not.
It's all right. There we go.
Success.
So this is what we want here, yeah?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay. Believe it or not, we even tested that right before I came on stage earlier. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of very quick demos. I only have a few minutes now. That will show you what this looks like in Photoshop. In Photoshop right now, and this has been in Photoshop for a couple of years, and many of the other creative products from Adobe, including Lightroom and others like Premiere. You can capture information about your identity. You can attach your social media accounts, indicating that this came from me. Perhaps I'm a copyright holder. But crucially, also the fact that this was made by an Adobe tool and is a video that was edited with a number of ingredients, for example, in the case of video. So I'm going to start, with, hopefully folks are familiar with Adobe Firefly, which is Adobe's generative AI engine that produces images and a number of other things like text effects and such. So this is Adobe Firefly. My internet connection is a little slow, so I pre-generated these images of an adorable alien. Firefly is ethically trained on licensed source material and material for which copyright is expired. So I should point out it's not possible to generate celebrities or other things that you might with other things, but we'll imagine this little guy is our celebrity for today. Now if I drag that into this Verify site, which is freely available at verify.contentcredentials.org, I can see its provenance. So this is revealing data that is attached to this image permanently. It's showing me that it was generated today. Happy Halloween, October 31st. And then over here on the right, you can see under process that this was made by Firefly, the version of Firefly that was used in case we need to go back and check and see what model material was used to train it. And it's signed by a certificate from Adobe. So this is no different than the certificate that lights up the lock icon, which I understand Google is getting rid of, that will tell you this is secure, this was signed by Adobe, and we're vouching for the fact that Firefly is a legitimate product that we make, and we're attaching a digital signature to it. Now that can get more interesting if I jump into Photoshop. And now I'm going to bring an image that I downloaded earlier today of the moon landing. So this image is from Adobe stock. And if I look at the Content Credentials tab in Photoshop, I can turn on Content Credentials. I should point out this is all opt-in. There's no desire here to have people reveal information about themselves, their identities, or other facts about the creation without their consent. You can see in this case I've connected a number of my social media accounts, meaning those things will be signed into the provenance or the content credential, and I've even connected some Web3 information if that's of interest to track the provenance of things like NFTs. And then if I preview that, you can see over here on the left, this information will be included, my LinkedIn account, all these things are linked. And in fact, we have an image as an ingredient down here that came from Adobe stock and has content credentials. So that will say this came from Adobe stock inextricably. If I then create something using Content Aware Fill, a new feature in Photoshop that uses Firefly, and I'll create one of those adorable aliens. I have no idea what's going to happen. This is the, something will happen. This is the fun part of the live demo, and if our internet connection holds up, we'll see something applied to this image that is not part of the photograph. Just give that a second. Everyone feeling the suspense? We really don't know what's going to appear here. Dramatic effect. This is unscripted. Okay, if that doesn't work, I have a pre-prepared one. We'll give it 2 more seconds. Okay. I'm going to blame the internet connection here and show you the prepackaged version, just like on a cooking show. We'll take one out of the oven that I made a few hours ago. So here's an image that we would have generated and exported using that same base image. And in this case, you can see this is the original from Adobe stock. The process says this was delivered by this particular tool in Adobe stock. And then here's one that I modified with well-understood result in an alien. So in this case, this image on the top there shows you that this is the final product, and in fact, it combines multiple pieces of content, one of which was an AI generation, and here's that original. And if I wish, I can even compare those two using this handy compare button down here and just say, show me that compared with the other. And let's do a little slider. So this is again, this is a free tool. This is demonstrating the richness of what content credentials can contain. So I can see that, oh, okay, that was a photo that did not originally contain the alien. You can use this sort of fun, tongue-in-cheek example to apply to political campaigns, news, creative mashups, and those kinds of things, so that we can actually see the ground truth of how this thing was made. And then I'll wrap up very briefly with a demo of what this looks like for video. And I'd urge you to visit contentcredentials.org. That's a good sort of tip of the iceberg jumping off point to learn more about how this works, what it is, who it's intended for, and ultimately what consumers will see when this enjoys wide adoption. And one of the things you'll find there is the verify tool, so you can inspect content at your leisure. Oh, let me show you one other thing, actually. One other live demo, because I'm a glutton for punishment here. This is my actual live LinkedIn feed. We often get asked, well, you know, Andy, how is that content credential actually permanently attached? We can strip metadata all day long. There are tools that will do it. Lots of desktop tools will do it. In fact, your social media platforms will typically remove metadata in the interest generally of privacy. You've all heard a lot about watermarks. That seems to be a very popular umbrella term for marking AI-generated content or real content with some kind of indelible, invisible watermark. So we've also thought a lot about combining these ideas so that you have the bandwidth or data richness that I showed you in a content credential coupled to the resiliency that a watermark offers. So even if the metadata is stripped out, or I take a photograph of a photo or re-record something, the content credentials do persist. And in this case, let's see if our live demo works out. We have a browser extension indicating what browsers will do eventually. And in that extension, I can see that, in fact, if I refresh this page, and scroll down to that image that I took at Adobe Max a couple of weeks ago. This has a content credential. We're recovering it using the watermark because, in fact, LinkedIn has stripped out the metadata. And if I click View More, this will take me to that site. And I can understand that not only was this produced in Lightroom, exported by me, but if our internet connection works, we'll also be able to see that it was actually taken on a Leica camera that we showed earlier. So this is signed by Leica using their integration of the open source technology, and then this was exported by Lightroom. So again, had I made changes, edits, punched up shadows, in this simple case, on social media, even without LinkedIn's explicit implementation in this case, we can still see those content credentials. And I'll wrap up by showing you what this looks like in video. We've been talking about video a lot. This is a player based on the open source -JS standard, the same thing that YouTube uses to deliver video at multiple bit rates. Netflix uses this as well. And here we have something that I grabbed from Adobe stock. This video on the top shows you a blue scrubber bar indicating that every chunk of video that's coming into this player as I watch it, as I stream, has this provenance attached to it. So we've signed it. We indicate that this is from this particular website, again, in this case, stock, and we can even link our social media accounts. If anyone changes this, we call this tamper evident. If anyone changes the video, edits it, tries to tamper with the metadata, this will turn red and indicate that, you know, this is no longer as trustworthy as you might think. And down here in the simulated news conference, you can see this. After a few seconds of playing this video, you'll see a red X appear here. And in fact, the scrubber bar will turn red, indicating that this section of video has been changed. This is not what the White House issued or what the Prime Minister issued. And if you want to learn more about that, here's all the provenance data that it should contain, who issued it, where it came from, how it was made, what camera was used, those kinds of things. But now we're indicating that there are two sections of this video that have been tampered with or changed in some way. So these simple ideas implemented via a global standard called Content Credentials, we think empower consumers, fact checkers, creators, news media to provide the transparency that has been certainly a theme of the AI Fringe and hopefully the summit that's happening as well. And we think this is a very pragmatic way that's standards-based to bring this to anyone who needs it with no cost, no licensing, no patent encumbrances whatsoever. So I'd urge you to check out the C2PA. Start at contentcredentials.org to learn more, and please talk to me. And if you'd like one of these fancy pins, I can connect you with one as well. So thank you very much for your time.